Well, good evening, everyone. I will go ahead and try to put my phone on vibrate and welcome everyone to the January 2025 meeting of the Davis Police Accountability Commission. We'll go ahead, and I know we have some folks coming in, so they might come in the middle of this or a little bit later in our meeting, but we'll take the role that we've got. Commissioner Wilson, here. Commissioner Bliss, Commissioner Canning, myself, Commissioner Horton, I am here. And then we are, I believe, waiting on Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald and Vice Chair Griswold to join us. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? I forgot it. There's less of us here. Any further discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Brief announcements from staff. Kelly.
Okay, there's just a couple of things. One, staff is working on some additional information to implement the council's direction via commissions and providing information to council with for decisions about adding agenda items. Since we don't have that ready yet, what I did for the commission's February meeting, outreach meeting, is I just put an informational item on the council's agenda for tomorrow evening. We're trying it out and seeing how that works. So if you look at the council's very extensive consent calendar for tomorrow evening, which has one item, that is the item. Nothing you need to know or do other than it's there. And it's an informational item. I thought it would be a good opportunity to show, here's how we're trying to improve communications and enhance communications between commission and council. So
Just to make sure I'm as clear as possible as to what's going on. So there's an information item on tomorrow's it's a special meeting, right? Okay, no, tomorrow's council meeting, to let the council know that we're having the outreach meeting.
yes, and what it's about.
Okay.
So it's a good opportunity, quite frankly, for anybody who looks at the agenda or anything to also know about it. So that's the goal anyway.
Any questions for Kelly?
One other quick announcement, similar to this evening's meeting at this commission, tomorrow evening, the council will be electing their annual mayor and vice mayor. So just as an FYI. It's 1 year now. When we switched to districts, we switched how we did the mayor and vice mayor. So it's 1 year roughly coordinating with the calendar.
And I know you mentioned this, Kelly, at the last meeting, but when is council going to decide on its new slate of council liaison positions?
So once we know who the mayor is, the mayor works with staff to get that done. So I anticipate, hopefully, we'll have a mayor announced or known tomorrow evening. And then on the 21st, at the council meeting on the 21st, which is the next council meeting after tomorrow, hopefully we'll be able to bring back the slate with all 5 of the existing council members on there for their liaison appointments.
Any commission announcements? I looked through I usually use this time for monthly observances. January is kind of scant in terms of ones that I thought were public safety or police accountability related. Of course, y'all know on the 20th, the city will be hosting its annual MLK event at the Veterans Memorial Theater. Well, I'm sorry, it's Veterans Memorial, right? Okay. Didn't want to make sure I was saying anything incorrectly. And it's going to feature a march, which I know some activist groups that I may or may not be a part of are going to be participating in to Central Park after the speaking portion of the event. Of course, given generally the time period I think that we're going into in terms of discussing public safety issues and police accountability issues, and particularly because of what is also coinciding with MLK Day this year with the federal inauguration. You're right, yes, with fun calendar coincidences. But I know that there's going to be a lot of people sort of looking to how we can recommit to sort of this community's values in a number of those areas. And I know at least some of those, are centered around justice issues, particularly around law enforcement. And so I look forward to hopefully seeing a good chunk of commission members and Davis residents out at the King celebration not too long from now. Any other commissioner announcements? Council liaison. Oh,
No, I don't have anything, but I do see that the long range is saying that we are going to do the liaison appointments on the 21st. I guess that's provided that everything is. falling into
Yeah,
place.
the hope is that we'd be able to work them out and then bring them forward on the 21st.
thank you, thank you. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our general public comment, and this would be our section of the agenda to address the commission on items either not on our agenda, or if you imagine that you have comments on one of our agendized items but cannot stay for that item, this would be the time. I welcome any person looking to engage with us. You have 3 minutes, just so you know, if you haven't addressed this beloved commission before.
Thank you very much.
Recognize when I don't say that at the beginning. It's a very secure location. But yes, this would be me trying to correct on past mistakes of not noting the time when folks who perhaps have not addressed us in the past end up addressing us. Then we end up with misunderstandings, and we don't want that. Digging for my chapstick. Thank you. The
What
floor
I'd
is
like-
yours.
Right. Alan Hirsch, the Davis Lorax. What I want to talk to tonight is a threat, potential threat to Davis. It could be very traumatic. And it goes by the generic title of moral panic. A moral panic is an agreed upon social evil that's spread, that people are meant to believe by misinformation is widespread, and they target an out group as a source of that group, and they expunge that group. The classic being the Salem witch trial, where there was the threat of heresy. The out group of people were women, and they were targeted. We've also seen the McCarthyist McCarthy movement, the Red Scare then, where they basically picked on people. They were afraid of the Soviets and afraid of that. So we picked on the liberals and the progressives, and those were thrown out. There were things. We also have the blacks in the South who were those criminal. They were afraid of their lawlessness and their possibly impingement of white women, and they were the lynchings. I would say there are many of these things. We had the pedophile scare in the 1990s. Societies are and Davis is exquisitely placed to be susceptible because we have a very fine-tuned moral sensibility. When the mosque was desecrated, we marched. When the imam said something and it was shared by the Israelis' translation, we marched and we protested. When Beth Bourne spoke, we protested, we reacted. Maybe we overreacted. Maybe that was a sign of going a little too far because we shut her down and lost courts. I'm not saying here when I pass this out that there is not anti-Semitism in our community. Children are being threatened. There are lots of microaggressions, and there are some cases of some vandalism. But I'm saying that basically the Christian right is culturally appropriating anti-Semitism, and they will activate, they could potentially activate us and ours as a community and make us afraid and make us turn on ourselves, people within our community. And this is some evidence I have seen. There are some members of the Jewish community who have in the past allied with the Christian right, and they are, I'm afraid, they will exploit the real actions of anti-Semitism and exploit that to basically just attack our own progressive organizations. We've already seen HR 9495, which is the bill which would have allowed them to administratively remove the nonprofit status of organizations who the administration decides is furthering terrorism, i.e. they're sympathetic to the Palestinians. This is a real potential threat.
That's 3 minutes.
And the police we need to be careful of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other general public comment? If not, I'll go ahead and take it back to the commission. I'm noting, as you know, we listened to the last public comment, that we're missing our one Jewish member of the commission. Has anyone heard from Commissioner Sherman? I didn't hear about him coming or not coming. Okay. Let's see. Oh yes, I'm sorry. Moving to our very lengthy one item consent calendar. Does anyone want to make a motion or a correction to the minutes from our December meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion on the December minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes approved. Moving to our police auditor update. I saw, yes, Mr. Connolly in our rectangle for today, and then I see another, there we go. And then there's Mike as well. So we leave it into your hands to update us on the reports and police accountability items that y'all want to draw to our attention this month.
Thank you, Chair. The setup this evening, at least on our end, is a little more interesting or less helpful in the sense that we can't see you. All we're seeing are black squares, which is okay, but I just want to make sure you could see us and hear us.
We can see and hear you, Mike. I think we're urgently working to address you not being able to see us.
Okay, fair enough. So on this part of the agenda, we'll be coming back to talk to you about potential audit topics, but that's a separate agenda item. So I'll defer that discussion until we get there. But with regard to our auditing update, you will see in your package a new log, a complaint log that I believe captures the various complaints that have been received by the Davis Police Department over the past year. 3 of those, and you can see that they are in various states of completion, depending on when, in part, on when they were received. We have the completed investigative reports on 3 of those cases, and we are working on writing them up for your presentation. They're in various stages of completion, but we expect that all 3 of them should be completed and available for discussion at your February meeting. At least that's our plan and our goal. And I think that's it. If you have any questions about any of the cases, we can certainly answer them, but we'll have a lot more information on the 3 completed ones by February. And that completes at least part of our segment.
Thank you. Any, excuse me, any questions from the commission for Mike?
Only just to
go
note
ahead.
that, Mike, you have 2 months to get it to us because our February meeting is going to be our public outreach meeting. And so we're not going to have a regular agenda for that meeting. So.
All right, could present them at the public outreach meeting. I'm just kidding, Robert. Thank you for that. So we'll certainly be done with these 3 and maybe more by March. The other thing you should know is that I think under the new leadership, we're going to start getting these cases in a more timely fashion and on a rolling basis instead of waiting till the end of the calendar year to get them all and then having to wait almost a year for some to report back on you. Some of these are old because they had been sitting around and had not gotten to us. But under the new protocol we worked out with Chief Henry, I think we'll be getting these in a more timely way. Steve, do you have anything else?
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here, and I would just echo what Mike was saying in terms of the flow of information. We came up in November, most recently, to Davis, sat with Chief Henry, and he definitely pledged to open up the lines of communication in a little bit more of an ongoing basis, which has proven to be the case since then. And For each of the cases that we've received, there's been some backing and forthing with follow-up questions, and we have found the department folks to be very responsive. So we're gratified by that and looking forward to sharing our perspective on the cases, I guess, in March. So thank you.
I'm sure Chief Henry, who's with us today, appreciated hearing it, and I'm quite certain that y'all didn't even pay him that much, or he wasn't even paid that to say all that. Any other questions from the commission? I'll go to public comment to see if there's any questions or comments for our auditors from the public. I'll welcome anyone who wishes to offer comment.
Right. I have a generic concern that we are collecting unvetted accusations of hate incident, hate crimes. And these could be transmitted to the FBI and other organizations and create an FBI file for people who just make an accusation, unvetted accusation. Citizens of this community, anyone can complain about anybody. And that goes into police file, unvetted, and goes to the FBI, and the FBI then can take that and then interview that individual if they want to choose to focus on potential anti-Semites. So I think we should understand how these files are collected and used and spread, and because they are personal files and can contaminate someone's entire career. My child was at Columbia University during the protests, Jewish child, and she said the students were most afraid of being doxxed by people and those files and those names and pictures, and then being potentially given to the police and the FBI, and then having a permanent file. So we should be sure that our police department is sensitive to that. I know they are, but we need to be careful of that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Mike and Stephen, with respect to what was just brought up in public comment, I do know that there's been a number of folks, particularly who are staff or students of the university, who shared this concern. And forgive me, I am, I have a political science degree. That's always what I offer up to people, and that I really know nothing. Do y'all have any insight or understanding as to how that process works? I know our chief is here, and we can maybe he could perhaps share some details if y'all are not aware of this, but do y'all know anything about how that process works?
Sure, I understand the question, Chair. If you're asking about if there is an allegation of hate crimes, how the federal government might get involved, I can certainly answer that because I used to do that work. Is that what your question was?
Well, I guess, for our purposes, it would be sort of more focused on DPD's sort of role in sort of interfacing with the federal government there.
Okay. I think you've got the chief there in person that be interested to share his perspective, but in my experience as a federal prosecutor, which I did for 10 years or longer, I can say that we often did receive referrals from the local police departments throughout the jurisdiction, and depending on the nature of the case, there might be charges that were filed locally. There might be charges filed federally. There might be charges filed both in the federal and the local side. It really kind of depends on the allegation and the seriousness of the complaint and who has better jurisdiction. The federal jurisdiction is more limited than state jurisdiction in the sense that in order to prosecute a hate crime on the federal side, you have to prove that the crime was hate related, but that it was also intended to interfere with a federal right. That's not the case on the state side. So there are times in which I would refer cases back to the local prosecutors for prosecutorial review because they had better jurisdiction.
Thank you, Mike. I guess we're back at the commission. Any other questions from the commission? All right. Thank you again. And I know we're going to hear from y'all later on in the agenda, but thank y'all for the report today. So moving us to item 7A, which I know Commissioner Wilson wanted to talk a little bit about. But but this is, I apologize, our surveillance technology item, specifically about the fixed public cameras and the automated license plate readers. I assume that there is a report, I imagine from the chief, or no?
Yeah. So since Chief Henry is here with us this evening, I'm going to turn it over to him. And while he's good with that, I see. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm going to move. He's going to sit here, and I'm going to fix a couple of things. The camera is now fixed, so our auditors can actually see what
Okay.
they're meeting about.
Okay. Thank you. So we welcome Chief Henry to give us the 411 on the license plate readers and fixed cameras, knowing that he's going to have some very astute questions from Commissioner Wilson about those topics later on. Take it away.
Sure. Good evening. So I wasn't prepared to give a presentation on this, but I can definitely give an overview. I'm assuming you've already received the informational staff report. So essentially, the police department is going to be taking to council on January 21st, which is informational only, a request to expand the LPR and the public safety camera system that we currently already have approved. The goal is also to submit for a grant through DOJ and the Community Oriented Policing Program to fund the initial cost of the project, which we're still working to narrow down, but we think we have a pretty close ballpark as to what that potentially would cost. So as you know, LPR is already approved technology. It was primarily approved on parking enforcement for digital marking of tires because we don't have parking meters in the city. So every single parking enforcement vehicle, I'm sure you've seen them, they're the little smart cars. They have license plate readers on them, and so they're capturing that data on a daily basis. The other element is the public safety cameras, which are also approved, and we have 2 locations where they're currently fixed, which is essentially Mason 80 and Richardson 80. The cameras have been extremely beneficial to the police department in ongoing investigations. And so our request is essentially to expand both programs because Motorola has developed a camera system which integrates both at a pretty reduced cost. So it has a fixed stream camera, which isn't quite as good as the one we currently have because it doesn't have pan tilt zoom. So it's just basically fixed on a essentially lanes of traffic or an intersection. And then it has the license plate readers. The desire is to essentially put them on the exterior of the city. As you know, a high number of people who are arrested for crimes in the city of Davis do not live in the city of Davis. And also too, when cars are stolen in Davis, obviously a lot of times those cars exit through those ingress egress points to the city. The ability to have that fixed LPR is super beneficial when it comes to investigation. I can think of a variety of cases, but we just had an incident where there was substantial damage to some parks, including Chestnut Park. Luckily, citizens were able to get a license plate number, and we were able to work that back to identifying a suspect, and we're able to make an arrest related to that. But if they would have just seen a vehicle, because the individual who's responsible does not live in the city of Davis, we could have used the system to say, hey, we're looking for a vehicle matching this make and model that exited the city or entered the city during this time frame. And theoretically, we would be able to see if a vehicle matching that description came in or out of the city, which would then give us a license plate, which would then give us an investigative lead to go to. So there is obvious privacy concerns around LPR because it does collect a lot of data. We would solely control and own our data, so we would not share it. And we put in some pretty robust kind of guardrails within the policy to make sure that we're developing policy here that we feel is protective of privacy, but also consistent with state law. And essentially, that's it in a nutshell. But happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Want to take it away?
Yeah. This is just about parking in neighborhoods, so I'm glad that you've got other security issues. And this is sort of a historical thing. At one of the Community Advisory Board meetings, and I think it was actually before you were there, and this was prior to the electronic system now, back in the old placard days, there was a way for neighbors, like if I were to see somebody parked, and by the way, if I see somebody that parks in the neighborhood that I don't know, I always try to go out there and tell them, don't park there, you'll get a ticket. Some people are gracious and others are not very gracious. But in any event, prior to that, if there was a car parked in front of the house, we had an option and a method to be able to go out and report, but we don't anymore. So is there a process? And by the way, your smart cars are in the neighborhood. I live across the street and the smart cars are there way more frequently, so thank you. But if we do find that a car is parked for any length of time, is there a method by which we as neighbors or anybody in town that lives in a restricted area can report or do something?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always report to policeweb.com. You can call the non-emergency number. And then in the website for the police department, there is a link within code enforcement section, which actually oversees parking enforcement. And you can send it to them as well. So we do get those complaints. It's usually vehicles that are parked beyond 5 days. And so our process is to go out, we run the plate, we see if we can identify the registered owner, we make contact with them and, advise them, hey, your vehicle needs to be moved. And then we notice it. And then within 5 days, we come back out. And if it hasn't been moved, then yes, we do tow it.
But I'm going to assume then for privacy, there is no app that a person could have to find out if somebody's car is registered.
Nope.
I had to ask.
Sorry.
Commissioner Bliss?
I really enjoyed reading your information because I know you covered many of the issues that I think many of us up here have said over the years as to why we're concerned about this. But you've listed a number of intersections. With the amount of money you've put in for the grant, would this cover all of them, or could you tell us how you hope to choose? Because Dylan and I know our favorite intersection. We would love to be monitored, but how will you choose, or would all of these be covered?
Yeah, our hope is that we'll be able to secure funding that will cover all of them. That's our anticipation. The cost of LPRs and cameras has reduced dramatically, the hardware. It's, right now it's the storage that is the biggest cost. We're also required by government code to retain any video for 1 year, which is tough because a lot of this video is of no investigative use, but we have to hold on to it. But essentially what we did was we kind of looked at areas where we see heavy ingress or egress to the city, essentially creating a kind of a perimeter so that when cars come in, come out. We stayed away from internal cameras within the city because those would mostly capture vehicles that probably reside within the city. So that was kind of the reason we identified those specific intersections. But obviously we would have to kind of figure out if the funding was less than we anticipated, then we would have to figure out which ones we were going to prioritize.
Will these cameras be filming just people coming in or also people exiting?
It would be both. So the intersection would have coverage coming in, coming out. The idea is your car gets stolen, you call us, we would run the system and we would say, oh, the car left the city about 10 minutes ago and it left off of this street or through this intersection.
So all 4 directions at an intersection would be covered.
Correct. Yeah, primarily it would be the ingress egress. So some of those intersections would not cover all 4 quadrants of the intersection.
Thanks for coming tonight, Chief.
Absolutely.
So in the report, you mentioned 65 times they used these cameras 65 times for specific investigations, and you had 53 hits. So is 65 times the total number of queries of the system?
No, my guess is, and I'm still waiting to get that final query because we have to report that out. It's probably going to be slightly higher because there are times where we'll use it for traffic collision information. This was taken from Investigations Division. And what I asked was essentially the investigations commander was, can you tell me how many times we accessed it related to criminal investigation? And how often was it actually successful that it turned up some piece of investigative lead for us?
So they're used for things other than, as you mentioned in here, you mentioned traffic studies and things like that. So, I mean, I think I'd be curious to know how many times the system was queried for the different uses and maybe what the distribution was. Obviously, the criminal investigation is probably your top priority.
Sure.
Use of them. Can I keep going? Thank you. I just noted that under the section under traffic engineering, it may not, that's not our purview in this commission, but it might be interesting to have an example how that would work. Maybe not for us, but for the bicycle and traffic commission. I don't know if they're interested in that sort of thing. That's sort of an aside. You have 9 locations that Mary just asked about. As you said, sort of setting up a perimeter. But you've asked for 24 cameras. So we've got 2 now. You've got 9 locations identified. That's 11. So what happens to the other 13 cameras?
Well, again,
What
those
do you anticipate?
Yes, absolutely. So when we say a location, it's not going to be, it doesn't identify the number of cameras required to get the entire intersection. So we do have 2 locations now, but I want to say, do not hold me to this. I think it's in excess of 15 total cameras, because the idea is that it gets all potential paths of travel so that the entire intersection's covered. Because what we don't want to do is have a quote unquote blind spot where somebody exits and we miss that opportunity to capture that investigative lead. So.
Okay, so the 24 cameras basically would give you coverage of ingress and egress and all the different directions. So at Lake and Russell, for instance, you get eastbound and westbound.
Correct.
And northbound, et cetera. Okay, so you have multiple cameras at these locations.
Correct.
Got it. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yep, absolutely.
How much training do people get in this technology?
So it's quite a bit. There's not a standardized training, but we outlined it in our policy as to the topics that would be covered. And as like any training, we would post that to our website. The idea is, one, to make sure people understand how the system works, to obviously make sure, just like any database system, that there's a need to know, right to know. What are the ethical considerations when using this data? How do we properly validate the data? The cameras are very effective. They can have a success rate of usually above 90% on capturing the plate, but we do require that there's validation of that data because what we don't want is people taking enforcement action just based solely on the license plate reader saying, hey, this plate is concerning because it's associated with a homicide suspect out of West Sacramento, and then we take action, we turn out that the last number was misread. So we put safety guards in there, and that would obviously be included in the training.
One final question, if I can. The 56 cases that you cite in the report, 53 positive results. Can you sort of break down for us the kind of offenses that they, car theft, who knows what else, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a variety of things. We had a hit and run that resulted in a fatality where the camera was able to pick up the vehicle, which we were then able to track to a location in Sacramento. That case would have most likely gone unsolved because there was no witnesses. A lot of cases have to do with theft. As you can imagine, Target has a high number of theft cases, and usually they're related to organized retail crime if they make it all the way to investigations. And it's usually a matter of the retailer saying, hey, the suspect vehicle was this type at this time, and we'll review the tape, and then we'll find the vehicle, we'll find the corresponding license plate, and now we can build a case around that.
Thank you. When the annual surveillance reports, Kelly, this might be a question for you and the chief. There's usually a section of the annual report that reports how many uses it had during the year. I would think it would be helpful. I mean, personally curious about the distribution of different offenses during a year of the use of these. So maybe when you report for the year in the annual report, just to list the kinds of cases that came up and what the distribution of them was. I think that might be helpful. I don't know if anybody else would be interested in it, but.
Can I just ask a clarification? Sorry, over here. When you say types of cases, you mean the types of activity, the offense, like a stolen car or a abduction or something? Okay.
I want to say thank you to the chief for being here this evening. It really is good to communicate with you and have you involved in this. The question I have, and it's come up before at various times, and I've had parents bring it to my attention, especially, what about parks, in particular parks where there tend to be, well, all of our parks, of course, have, slides and all that, but I guess I'm thinking of our farmers market area. There's been concern from parents, in particular, parents that have children that go to the preschool at the Davis Community Church and then head on over to play at the park. And unfortunately, there's been some situations that have not been good for anybody, adult or child, by an individual that has shown up there. And so what about that? I know the focus isn't on parks, but does this allow for that? Or are there any grants available to look at in the future to address that, just to make sure people are safe in parks? Thank you.
Yes, no, it's a good question. And we do get a lot of community comment around why we don't have public safety cameras in the downtown area in parks. It's expensive. Again, the data collection, the camera systems would have to be slightly different because these are more focused on a very small space. It's just lanes of traffic, as opposed to a park area where you'd almost have to have 360-degree camera coverage, which there are systems to do that, but they're expensive. So if that was something that we were going to look at in the future, we'd have to find a funding source probably for that as well. Again, it's not necessarily the initial cost of the hardware, it's the ongoing cost of the data storage.
And again, parents have mentioned this to me, and then, of course, the recent unfortunate incident that happened at Slide Hill, the female that was attacked. And so I just appreciate you, the department, keeping an eye open maybe for grants like that. I certainly don't want to invade people's privacy, at parks, but thinking of, safety for individuals just walking in the park or their kids playing in the park. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll, start off as some of my colleagues did in terms of thanking you for being here tonight. I know it's sort of impromptu, but as I was mentioning when you were with us last month, it's my sort of ideal that we have this kind of relationship where we, number one, I think as other people have mentioned in our past meetings, sometimes we need information that Kelly always reminds us that she is not always the universal holder of. And so it's glad to have you here as we're diving through the nuts and bolts of something that's fairly technical. And so that's a good lead into my first question, because I just want to make sure I'm clear as to what all of the technology that we're talking about here. So I understand, perimeter of the city, car thefts and other sort of crimes that we're wanting to track people who are predominantly not Davis residents who are, committing these sorts of crimes. And then, of course, we have our existing license plate reader sort of system. My understanding is obviously in what y'all are asking for from council, y'all are asking for an expansion of the fixed cameras, right? Just in terms of number and intersections covered. Are we looking at trying to do a similar expansion of the city's existing parking regime focused cameras or license plate readers?
No, we have 3 parking enforcement officers, and so the 3 cars are equipped with it, so there'd be no expansion of that
Okay, cool. I
program.
just, that didn't seem like that was reflected in the report, but I just, because our history with that acronym and with that
Yeah.
technology is with that other sort of use. And so I just wanted to make sure we were specifically talking about an expansion of the perimeter cameras. And so, I mean, as people can probably expect of me, I want to scrutinize a little bit of this do not share with others that you mentioned. Because I think that's, I think we all believe and strive for good policies here in Davis, which safeguard people's, civil liberties. But once we hand off to another jurisdiction, all of that's out the window in terms of, Davis values being put into those sorts of policies. And so would not share, is that a would not share under any circumstances? Can you explain a little bit more?
Sure. So it's not uncommon for law enforcement agencies to share information related to a criminal investigation. So my guess is it wouldn't occur a lot, but it would occur in that it would really kind of come in the way of, let's say Woodland had a crime, name whatever type crime you want to fill the void, and they say, hey, has this car entered your city? And so what they would do is they would put in a formal request to the PD, just as they would for a crime report or any other information or LPR data now. What we do is we review the request, the associated report number, and the justification for it, and then we make a determination whether or not we would release the data. So if it's for a criminal investigation where there's a potential that that data would be in the city, then we can share it. A lot of times they'll ask for information and we have nothing responsive. And so we'll just tell them we have nothing responsive. So I think that, the couple elements in here we put in that obviously state law already covers, but we wanted to make sure it was codified in the policy, was sharing with outside states, right? Other states, other state law enforcement agencies, or the federal government. And those we would not.
And so in, I guess, in the cases that aren't, in that family, the sort of, sharing between one municipal agency and another, can you, would whether or not you have the information be the main sort of determinant as to whether or not you hand that over to the other local agency?
It would be one of our decision factors, but the other would be what are they asking it for? What's it related to? Is it to an active and criminal investigation or not? And so those would be kind of the 2 criteria we would use.
Maybe this is because, again, I have a political science degree. So what could a local law enforcement agency be asking for that type of information from that wouldn't be pursuant to a like a criminal investigation? I'm having a hard time imagining what that is.
You know what? I don't know. Honestly, it could be potentially a civil matter that maybe the sheriff's office is looking for something related to civil enforcement. But honestly, when we get a request from another law enforcement agency for information, it is almost always, and I can't think of a case where it hasn't been, but it is almost always going to be related to an ongoing criminal investigation.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Just, I mean, I'm sort of thinking about, I mean, I can think of a lot of ways, say there's somebody is alleged to have committed something in one county and then they're driving through another one, maybe trying to get away, or there's like a spree, or just they're looking for someone and then they're trying to find them. And then if they're taking pictures of the license plate, then it's easier to track someone down.
Be pursuant to a criminal investigation.
Yes, predominantly it'd be
Right.
pursuant to a criminal investigation. And, you know, every jurisdiction around us has LPRs. So any data we would have, they would probably most likely have very similar data. If somebody was exiting, let's say, Woodland and moving into Davis, or from West Sacramento to Davis, you know, they would probably have similar data.
Okay, so just to clarify from, a public, accountability standpoint, not for state, not for federal, but most of the time for local agencies.
Yeah, so state, we would share information with. If
I'm
the
sorry,
state was
outside other
conducting-
states. I
Correct.
said that
Yes,
incorrectly. Yes.
yeah, law enforcement agencies, which is prohibited by state law. And then obviously also covered in our policy, but yes.
So
those we
state
would not-
and local
Correct, yeah,
agencies for a criminal investigation purpose.
correct.
Okay.
And we vary, and I can't think of one here in Davis where the
Right.
state has asked for data related to an investigation. It's usually a criminal report related to an investigation, but not any of that data.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
The department has a number of data systems. Does LPR data go into any of those systems?
No, it's stored separately. So it's a Azure government account that is through Microsoft that partners with Motorola for the data storage. So it's siloed.
Okay. So no leakage from
Oh.
one system into another.
They promise there's no
I
leakage.
mean-
But
I
yes,
mean-
they're
I
absolutely
mean, you're not,
bifurcated systems.
yeah, so the staff isn't entering it into anything else except its own siloed data system.
Correct. Unless, of course, the data becomes useful in a criminal investigation, then it's entered into our records management system as part of the investigation.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, we'll move to, did we already do public comment on this? Okay, so we'll move to public comment on this item. Any public comment on our item related to our fixed public safety cameras and automated license plate readers? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I've watched too many BBC mysteries and to appreciate the cameras and solving those mysteries. I note that the most important exit off I-80 doesn't need to have a camera. I'm sure there's a reason for that, but I note that. I'm kind of wondered two questions. One, how are bicycles and bicycle identifications used? I bicycle on some of these rural roads. And the second was, what is the accuracy? And I raised that because of I-80, because they are tolling based on license plates. And those tolls will be significant, $5 and $10 one way. So I wonder what the accuracy, because I have noticed license plates deteriorate quite significantly over time. You watch, you look around, you see the one. I wonder what's the accuracy of that, and can we what sort of accuracy are you reaching now? So thank you very much. I think it's a good program, but it needs to be. I'm just kind of curious. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I will take it back to the commission. Chief, do you want to address any of the things that appeared in that last section of public comment?
Sure. Yeah, I can answer those. So the LPRs will not pick up bicycles. They're solely designed to pick up a license plate. The camera that we're looking to purchase does have the streaming option, so it would potentially catch a video, which is not LPR. That could be helpful, obviously, in traffic collisions if an accident does occur in one of those covered intersections. Accuracy is pretty high when the plate is not obscured. People engaging in criminal conduct have figured out that they can obscure the plate, which reduces the likelihood of a capture. But, the state just passed a new law, which basically now makes it a crime to obscure your license plate in any way, partly because of the impact of LPRs in investigations and the desire to continue that technology as being useful.
Go ahead.
So if there's a law that says that you can't do that, if it's done, how do you know, how would they catch them?
Well, you're right. The reality is, just like any other equipment violation, if it's observed by an officer, a citation can be issued, a fix-it notice, essentially to remove whatever the obstruction is.
But wasn't there a paint or something that they used to be able to put on there that glowed or something? So, I mean, you would only see that if there was a light shining on it, right?
Yeah, there's a number of different items that can be placed across the plate to reduce the likelihood of the camera capturing an image of it. And that, as you know, the governor's office has been very proactive in utilization of LPRs and recommending their use. And so I wasn't surprised to see that legislation passed because, any technology, at some point, people will figure out how to counter it or defeat it. And it's not super complex to do that. So I think that's the reason for why that legislation was pushed through. Yep.
Go ahead.
So, what we're being asked for tonight is to provide comments to the council, or to say we approve, we disapprove, whatever.
Really, it's any kind of input you want to provide. Generally, this would come in the form of your comments and your questions or your concerns that we would then package up and relay to the city council for when they are making a decision. If you want to leave it at that, you can do that. If you wanted to make a motion, you're certainly welcome to do that as well. Does that work for you, Chief?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm mixed on this because just as an individual, as a parent, just living here for as long as I have, over 20 years, geez, I know that our peace officers have done a great job addressing certain issues when there have been people that have not had the best interest. And whether that was through license plate reading or somehow surveilling them. But the concern I have, and I know others have too, they've expressed it, is when that goes too far or the information is misused. And I know it was some years ago that Senator or Assembly Member Weiner from the, I believe, State Assembly. Can't remember if he's Senator or Assembly Member. Senator, yeah, Senator at the time. Thank you. Thank you. I know, I was like, I can't keep track of where people are at the time. Senator Weiner. And he authored a bill about, the auditing these, because unfortunately there were some cities where the departments were not carefully monitoring and making sure that the data they collected was not misused. We haven't had that problem here, but we don't want to have that problem. I think I like the idea of having it, but I think there needs to be in place some checks and balances so that it isn't misused. Right now it's not, thank goodness. And, what can we do? What steps can we put in place to make sure that in the future that does not happen? So I agree with what Senator Weiner did, because it's good to have those checks and balances in place, but I think there's a purpose for it, and I think it could be very helpful to our city and to law enforcement to keeping us safe. But I think we need to have those checks and balances. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, Vice Chair Griswold.
Oh, hi. I wanted to ask about the fiscal impact, and I know it's outlined here, the initial purchase of $350,000 and then ongoing annual recurring costs of $17,800. And then there are these potential sources for funding listed. What would happen if the city council were to approve this and then the department did not get these grants?
No, that's a good question. The project dies.
Okay.
It is, it's a pretty hefty investment. And so the way the surveillance technology ordinance is written, I can only apply for grant funding if the technology is approved ahead of time. So We are putting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse here, but that's by design. So if we were unsuccessful in the initial purchase grant, then we would be back to square one and we'd have to find another funding source availability.
Okay. And it would all be outside funding. It's not as if once the council approves it, you're getting it and then you figure it out in your own budget or something along those lines?
No, I wish Kelly would give me $350,000 to accomplish it out of general
That's
fund.
not what anyone is signing up. for
Yeah,
potentially.
no, essentially what we're saying is, we need approval for the additional locations. And then our goal is to hopefully be successful in this grant. And if that doesn't work, then we would have to reassess and come up with hopefully another funding opportunity somewhere else.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's, hypothetical, let's say you get the grant. How long before these are all operational? And how much does it cost the city to install them all? Do they have to put up more utility poles or they're all on existing poles and things like that?
No, they're all on existing poles. Installation is actually pretty easy for the most part. There's different models. Some of these are just LPR. The higher end one, which is the video and LPR, those require power tap into a pole. They'd be existing city poles. We've already gone out and kind of assessed the intersections to see their viability for being able to support the technology. So that's the part we're still trying to narrow down is installation cost, because we would have to outsource that with a contracted vendor. Some of them we could theoretically through Public Works install ourselves because they're solar powered and it essentially just attaches to an existing pole. But yeah, it would include, essentially the price would include the installation.
I want to follow up also like on pages 5 to 6 of your report where you, where it brings up concerns of the ACLU, as it says, criticizing law enforcement agencies' collection of ALPR images because of the risks it poses to privacy. And it sounds like the department has come up with a number of ways in which it would potentially address maybe some of the criticisms that the ACLU has brought up. I have concern if it doesn't address all of them, but also with the notion of sharing across departments in essentially creating sort of a, multi-county dragnet. And I don't know if all of the different departments are creating some sort of, like Cecilia was bringing up the notion of checks and balances or, around these issues. I mean, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 8 different bullet points you have listed, but it's not as if all the other counties are doing this. And so when you're sharing data, these safeguards are not in place actually, right?
Yes, you're correct. If we do share data, they could theoretically use it for any purpose that hopefully was not illegal, but they could share it with whoever they wanted. There is state laws that obviously are mimicked in our policy, which prohibit sharing with certain entities. But there's 2 ways to store license plate data. You can store your data and then you can open it up. And any law enforcement agency can come into your system and review your license plate data without requesting it. And that's like a shared, essentially an open, free shared data. That's not our goal. Our goal is going to be to lock it down. So it's only accessible by Davis Police Department. Again, we don't get a lot of them, but they do occur where somebody from a neighboring agency says, hey, we're investigating this specific crime and we're pretty sure the car made it into your jurisdiction. Can you verify? And obviously we could share that with them, which wouldn't be any different than we would share with them on a crime report or an investigative lead that we have that's connected to their investigative lead. The key with this is the kind of the exterior of the city, the way we set it up is the idea is it's cars coming out, coming in. So we're not sharing like data per se related to where a car is parking, i.e. at somebody's house or place of business. It's really ingress, egress, in and out of the city. And so, if we do have data that could be beneficial to an investigation, we would share it, understanding obviously that once we release that data, it's out of our control.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I see what you're saying in terms of an analogy, but the difference I see between sharing this type of data with another county, and you were relating it to the notion of if you already had an ongoing investigation, but this would be in the case of you didn't already have an investigation at all. You're just passively, continuously collecting data on citizens and then sharing it with other departments that do not have the same safeguards in place.
Correct, but they would have to give
Mhm.
justification for it.
Right.
So if they said, hey, we just had a robbery and this vehicle went down
Yeah.
southbound
Right. I just think there's a
102.
difference between if you
Correct.
had an ongoing investigation already, but in this case, it wouldn't be.
Well, it could be also too, they had an ongoing investigation that we're not aware of,
Right.
but the vehicle passed into the city. And so if we have relevant data to that investigation, obviously we would say, yes, it passed through this intersection at this time and this day.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you. Again, I like the idea that there are tools law enforcement can use to help our community be safe. And we are fortunate to live in Davis where we don't have instances that happen, knock on wood, that where there have been violations of people's privacy, in particular, customs enforcement, ICE coming in and doing searches, wanting to use the information for immigration purposes. That's my concern. I believe I shared that at the last meeting. Unfortunately, because the new administration and their promise to really crack down on immigrants, I would feel comfortable supporting this, but with some kind of audit. If there could be an audit done to ensure that this information is not being misused. As Elizabeth said, like, what if, we're in Davis? What if, I'm just throwing it out there, LA or San Francisco or Salinas, where there have been violations, and that's what brought about the concern from Senator Wiener. What if they wanted information? Okay, and like you said, and I'm glad you mentioned that, it wouldn't just be they want it, it's because they've been monitoring somebody that may have committed a crime. What assurances do we have, or what policies and procedures can we put in place so that the information is not misused? If there can be some kind of an audit or policy and procedure to help us feel better about that, I would be comfortable with this, but I just think there needs to be some, checks and balances. That's all.
No, and I have the same concerns. So we built into the policy that we would do audits every 12 months to ensure compliance. We're also in a unique situation because of our surveillance technology ordinance where we need to report how often did we use it, which is a different dynamic than other jurisdictions. If somebody was to reach out and say, hey, we are trying to assist ICE with locating somebody related to an administrative detainer, obviously we would reject that. One, it'd be illegal, but two, we would reject it either way. So that's, we tried to, former Chief Pytel wrote a pretty robust LPR policy, which gave me a great starting point. And what I did was I tried to expand that to the best of my ability to cover every option that could be of a concern, because I work for the police department, but I'll be honest, I don't like people having my data either. So I'm very cognizant and sensitive of that. And, we kind of point out specific policy requirements related to immigration, which is not our job and we shouldn't be involved in it. And reproductive rights, because there are other states that have different policies. So we made it very clear of, where our guardrails are and how we need to operate this system to be cognizant and aware of those privacy concerns.
Chief, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, whoever thought we'd live in a time when a woman was going to be followed, have her license plate written down because she had to go somewhere else for reproductive rights. But that has happened and it's been reported. And so I appreciate the department and I appreciate you mentioning that because that's very, very important. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Other questions? This has been this is what happens when the chief shows up. We can ask a whole series of questions. So just if there are no more questions, just in closing, again, thank you for being here this evening. You know, I think as you've heard from all of us, I know, Councilmember Partita has a stolen vehicle story, that ties in here. There's, even if that hasn't been, something that's happened personally in your life, you can imagine if you've lived in this community long enough, some sort of situation where either the gap of this technology not being present at some sort of point of the perimeter of town, maybe could have made the difference. I myself and I can assume by what I heard from some of my commission colleagues a little while ago have concerns about, non-criminal, usages of this kind of technology, particularly for just traffic enforcement and maintenance things in terms of vehicles, things that I don't think this level of technology would be an appropriate use for. I'll have to take this as my, usual soapbox opportunity to mention that I think, strengthening the department's relationship with private sector camera holders is a really important step in particularly addressing what I think some of the gaps were in the response to the May stabbings incident. Anyway, so again, appreciate you coming to tonight to enlighten us on the details of how all this works. Go ahead.
I guess I'm comfortable with putting a motion out that we support him going to the council to work for a grant for this. Or are you feeling that you don't want us to take any position, but Kelly should just put our comment?
I also don't want to lord over the commission, and so I'm comfortable, with the feedback that we've delivered. I think we've, made clear what our priorities were in terms of privacy, particularly with sort of criminal usage, and then some of our, questions about some of the potential sort of pitfalls that, that could occur with use of this technology. I think because of some of the hesitancy that I sense from some of our members at the very least, I feel like a motion supporting the item wouldn't necessarily represent unanimously the commission.
No, we have to vote on it.
And
so we would vote, so.
Right, yeah, I'm sorry. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the commission's acts in the most effective manner when we speak with one voice, and so I guess that we wouldn't have a unanimous vote on that motion, and so I'm it's one of those Nancy Pelosi things of don't bring it to the floor unless you know that the vote is assured. But again, my opinion is not the only controlling one here, Commissioner.
Just as kind of a point of like, I think Mary's bringing up a good question about what's our next step. I guess I had the understanding that we had the opportunity to speak with the chief, grateful for that. And I thought that we were saying thank you so much, and that after the chief left, we were going to keep talking about it. That's what I thought was going to happen, and that then we might decide what we were going to come forward with. 'Cause I would absolutely say we should not support it.
So I think right before you came in, Commissioner Bliss
Okay, I
asked a
missed
sort
that.
of, asked a sort of process question in terms of how, what was being asked of us here. And so we didn't necessarily make a plan that was that extensive, but did sort of, Kelly, pointed out to us that we could ask questions as we have in previous technology items, that we could move forward sort of an affirmative recommendation. We could, as we have on previous items, recommend not that. But yeah, we hadn't necessarily done any chair choreography necessarily for that portion of the discussion.
Well, and the chief came to the meeting. He didn't come to present this topic, so he wouldn't necessarily be leaving. So
Okay.
it basically is whether or not.
Oh, just
You missed all that beginning stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just as we've talked about before, in terms of sometimes discussion feels hampered, especially around an issue that he's asking for this from the council. And I don't know if people feel completely comfortable. Maybe everybody does. I mean, I've said, I don't think we should do it, but I thought this is I think it's a very important issue. And I think this is kind of one of the things that like our commission is about. And I think if we just gave, a few ad hoc comments that were made in front of the chief, that Kelly took those to council, to me, that doesn't feel sufficient. Like we're fully doing our due diligence and doing our job.
Too, it feels like
yeah.
we should
Do something more?
So, again, not that I really disagree with any of that. I just, repeat that I think our commission sort of acts most effectively when we speak with one voice. I don't think I'm really, going out on a limb to say that I don't think there's a unanimous vote against this technology or unanimous vote for it.
I think we should have that discussion.
Okay, yeah, no, I think we're in the middle of that now. And so, yeah, my inclination is to not put forward a vote that won't be unanimous. But I can understand if there would be.
So if I can move, like, can we just, I think I appreciate what Mary was doing. She made a motion and then we get to discuss.
You want a second?
Well,
I
yeah,
second the
Mary, did you actually make the motion?
Do you consider what you said a motion? I can.
I would like to make a motion that
That we
we
approve?
support
Okay.
the chief going to the council to get a grant for this upgrade in our security system for
Okay.
the city.
So the motion has been made and seconded. Any,
I don't know if-
Well, I want to have a conversation.
yes, you
I could
seconded it
support the
for
motion.
discussion. Yeah, seconded for discussion. Any further discussion on this item? Correct. Okay. Any further discussion on that? Possibly, yes. Seems like Robert has some discussion.
Yeah, I would support the chief's proposal with the council. So I would support Mary's motion.
Okay.
I think that it's not an outrageous expansion of 2 cameras that we have now. And I think the policy is fairly specific and has enough safeguards in it to allow us to be clear about what the department is doing with this data and how it would be used. And what you call the rails within which they operate. And in addition to state law, I think, so I would support the motion.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wilson.
Okay, sorry. Also, the fact that there's, at the end of 12 months, that there's going to be an audit, I'm assuming that that information would be presented to us and it could be reevaluated in a year.
Commissioner Escamilla.
Yes, I support this because I do believe that it helps to keep our communities safe, but I want to make sure that there's those guardrails. And I'm comfortable with, Chief, with what you mentioned, the audits, the internal audits. Didn't you say every few months? I'm sorry, you had said a year. Oh, okay.
Yes, audits every 12 months.
12,
So
okay.
annually, we do a look back.
Okay, annually, yeah. So with that in place and then understanding that, policies and procedures, something that if another jurisdiction asks for information and there's some kind of relation to ICE or something's going to violate somebody's privacy because they're either an immigrant or believed to be an immigrant, or if we're dealing with issues of reproductive freedoms, if there's some kind of policy that addresses those issues, so it's very clear. I support this. I just want to make sure that those are in place. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, both those items are covered in the policy.
Further.
Yeah, I would say my ongoing concern is, as the chief was mentioning, those are covered in the way that, Davis Police Department would use this, but he's also discussed how it would be shared with other departments. And I mean, I don't think they would say, we are using this to illegally catch immigrants. They're not going to say that, or maybe they don't even intend that, crimmigration is huge. So they would ask for the data potentially on a law enforcement basis. And then we don't know what other departments do with the data. We don't know what they do with it related to ICE enforcement, related to issues related, involving reproductive justice or anything, that we don't know what their potential safeguards are. And I'm not sure that these safeguards are even all that safe. I mean, like I said, there's like 8 bullet points here, if everybody's read those. I just think that, what could be gained by this is not as, in my book, it doesn't weigh out with what can be lost. And further around the, yes, there would be, after 12 months, there'd be an audit. But I mean, say there were like, some violations or whatnot, do you think they're going to take them down after the $350,000 investment? Like, I don't think that, I mean, I think they would obviously be responsible, and there might be some change in or something along those lines, but it's much easier if we had concerns to stop something before it happens than $350,000 is invested, and even say a couple years go by, 17,800 every year. And then I just don't, I think it'll keep growing. It's not going to go backwards.
So I had two, I see your hand and I have two, but I wanted to clarify just to make sure I'm understanding correctly. The criminal purpose sort of situation, it's not just that, say hypothetically, Napa County Sheriff's, makes a request, for the data here. They have to tell you what the criminal, like what the charge is, right? It's not just that they say criminal purpose, right?
Yeah, they would tell us the nature of the investigation.
Okay.
The charges associated with it, their corresponding report number, because that all gets documented. So essentially, what is the nature of this investigation that's requiring this information to be asked?
Okay. And since this would only be for local, I guess, and state agencies, this would be data that, DPD has access to in terms of like following up on, looking into, that sort of, for my job, there's a whole sort of, court database system, where all of the information that we would want to sort of interface with social workers about necessarily, is available to us after the phone call. Is something like that available to DPD in terms of law enforcement data throughout state agencies?
Just so I understand the question correctly. So are you asking if we can search other law enforcement agencies?
No, I'm sorry. So if again, in the scenario that I outlined, Napa says, hey, they, lay out the sort of the situation. Is there no way for you to say, oh, hey, we see that's right there in the computer, that case, with that, attached number to it is, right there on the computer in front of us. Is that not a thing that exists?
No. Obviously, if they're an actual law enforcement agency requesting the data, we take it at face value. So we don't have a process to verify that it's a real investigation. We just assume that the agency is actually investigating a crime.
Right. Okay. So with respect to this, issue with reproductive rights and immigration, the catch for that is what level of government we're associating with, right? That the assumption is that, or not the assumption, but the lay of the situation would be that federal authorities, or perhaps red state authorities, would be, engaging in perhaps, trying to utilize us for immigration enforcement, or, enforcing their laws with respect to reproductive rights. Is that the thing that catches us not sharing that type of information for those purposes, that we're not giving that to state and federal or other state and federal agencies? Or is it there a specific sort of, we're not sharing it for reproductive rights reason sort of laid out in the policy?
So we laid that out specific because it is an area of concern, but it is prohibited by state law to share that data with an outside law enforcement agency. When I say outside the state, it's also prohibited for us to share that with ICE related to immigration stuff. So, if let's say a federal entity, i.e. ICE, were to reach out and say, hey, we are trying to track this individual, have they traveled in or out of your city? That is data we would not share.
Okay. Go ahead.
Are you aware of any requests from other agencies for license plate information in the last year or two?
No.
Have you requested any information from other agencies?
We have. We get a lot of criminal activity from the Bay Area and from Sacramento that comes into the city and exits the city. So there are times where we'll have a vehicle description and then we'll ask a corresponding city if they captured an image of it.
I know you said that you have updated this policy, so there was no policy prior.
No, there was. Yeah, there was a pretty robust license plate reader policy, which is, in its essence is very similar to the one we have now. We just added substantially more guardrails to it to make it a little more robust.
So if in fact this were not approved, then the old policy would be in place.
Yeah, we still have an active policy of LPR. So essentially everything we're requesting to do, we can do today.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All those, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Or I guess we can do hands. That might be easier to record for Kelly's purposes. All those opposed? Any any abstentions? Okay. And then you will, I guess that'll be included in the, because I assume the packet's already created for tomorrow's.
This isn't going tomorrow.
Right,
This is,
right,
yeah,
later
this is
in the
going
month.
later. Right. So can I say a couple of things if you're done
Yes.
with the motion? Okay.
Please.
So in terms of procedure, the motion along with the gist of the conversation, some of the dissenting comments, the concerns, et cetera, that will all be shared. So don't ever feel like you can't make a motion. It may or may not pass. It doesn't have to be unanimous. The gist of the conversation will be shared with the council. As a check on that, there is a council liaison sitting right here who has heard the totality of the conversation and can, relay that to her colleagues as well. Make sure that it keeps us honest as from a staff perspective. And then just as a general procedural item for you guys to know, when we have a staff person or staff people who are here to address a particular topic, we would expect and anticipate that they would stay through the duration of that conversation. And assuming that the debate is respectful, whether or not you agree with us or, like the recommendation or like the issue or don't like it is fine. Our feelings are not going to be hurt. Your feelings are not hurt. Okay. So I just want to be sure you know that you can have a full and robust conversation. That's the purpose of why you're here. And that's why we need you to have these kinds of input. So that's it.
Thank you. We don't know how to do it any other way than full and robust. So let's see. Moving on to, and I'm have a jumble of all of my scribbles and notes. Yes, to the audit topics. So 7B. I don't know, Mike or Stephen, if you had anything to, thank you, Chief. If you had any suggestions for us, if not, we can just get into the commission's discussion.
We do, Chair. So Steve and I brainstormed a little bit, ran some ideas by city manager's office and by the chief, and we landed on 3 possibilities. We would like some input from the commission on which of the 3 you might like, or if there is a 4th that we didn't come up with that you like even more. We are amenable to that as well. But the 3 topics that we had thought might be insightful and helpful for you to consider are 1, an audit of the Davis Police Department's Field Training Officer Program. Whenever a new officer is hired, they go through a field training program of some sort. And so that would be one thing that we could look at and then report back to you on what we find. The second idea that we came up with would be to have a more general audit of in-service training for 2025 and provide some insight into what that training looks like. Likely attend some of the trainings that, will be scheduled this year so that we can actually have some lived experience going through the training, taking a look at the curricula, et cetera, and report back to you on that. We'll probably do a bit of a focus there if that ends up being the chosen topic to focus on issues like implicit bias or de-escalation or defensive tactics or constitutional law, civil rights, whatever, as opposed to some of the more mundane more mundane training that's provided, like. So that's a second idea. And then the third one would be to take a look at how the Davis Police Department manages and reviews vehicle pursuits. Vehicle pursuits are when a Davis Police Department vehicle operates its lights and sirens and goes above the speed and violates traffic laws in pursuit of of an individual in a car. So those are the three. We've had experience doing that in other jurisdictions, doing any of these audits, but throw those out there just for you all to think about and provide any feedback. And hopefully we'll have some consensus on what we should do with our auditing program this year. And I'll leave it at that, Chair.
Thank you so much. So I'll start from the last one and then sort of work backward. I spent, I don't know what people did with their holiday season. I took mine as a staycation at home, and among the many things, Netflix and Disney Plus and YouTube that I ended up watching was a lot of different, law enforcement pursuit vehicles, interrogations, and things like that. And it's interesting that you bring up that last item about, the management and review of pursuits, because it was a thing that got me thinking, how many of these happen in Davis? What are some of the policies? And so it's interesting that you bring that up. I am somewhat interested in that, but if the general understanding is there's not a whole lot of those, in Davis policing history, that I might sort of put that one lower on the priority list. With regard to the first two, this might be a workload issue, but I'm kind of wondering to what degree those two could be combined into one audit. Again, it might be too much to fit into one. But the reason I say that is, I feel like conversations about police training amongst this body and in other areas that I've seen typically go, really one way. It's sort of, hey, what can we do to improve police training, which usually comes from, folks in our sort of line of work and pushing for advocacy and transparency. And then, people representing the institution saying, well, that's all in post. And then the conversation's over. And so I think a concentration on what, for lack of a better term, DPD has, sort of like academic freedom on, I think might be a more fruitful way for us to dig into what is the existing situation, and then also what can we do that's within Davis's authority to improve things. So, if it were possible to do both of those together as sort of a, Davis or DPD training curriculum and principles, I would certainly be interested in that. But I don't know if either of y'all have commentary on either of those things, and if not, I'll turn to Commissioner Bliss. Commissioner Bliss. Oh, I don't know, Mike, were you going to say something?
No, go right ahead.
Mike, I was wondering, when you're talking about vehicle pursuits, does that include speeding or other in it? Because if that's the case, we have a fair number of those in our, and if that is the case, and you would have the ability to see body camera as they approach the vehicles and their interaction with them, that has a high interest on my end.
And I'll just throw in one of the things that I had written down as one of my ideas was actually just an audit in just body cams overall. I have just a lingering concern in the back of my mind about are they being turned on when they're supposed to all the time? What's that rate? Is that a 90%? Is that a 70%? And so, anyway, I have some interest in in a number of other areas. So thoughts about the ideas that Mike presented, ideas that other folks have?
I wanted to follow up about your number 2 with the different topics, general audit in-service trainings. And then what I heard you mentioning was implicit bias, de-escalation, defensive tactics, and civil rights, but that you might need to pare down within those. Like how many, all of those I thought would be fantastic to hear out of time. How many of those would it be, like 1, or how many do you think you could cover?
Well, some of that will depend on what the schedule looks like for this year, which we have not explored yet. So if we ended up doing that topic, what we'd probably do is take a look at what the in-service schedule looks like for the coming year. We're 6 days into January, so I don't think they've done a whole lot yet. So that's how we probably would approach it. Certainly, if there are areas that the commission would have particular interest in hearing about, we could, make sure that we look for those if they are going to be taught this year. Dylan, to your point about post dictating the training, they do provide more guidance in some areas than others with regard to what that training looks like. But a lot of it really is left to the individual agencies to fine tune and figure out how best to deliver that training.
And if I could just add a little bit to the topic, and Mike and Dylan mentioned post, the actual post requirement for all California law enforcement is 25 hours of training every 2 years, which actually isn't a lot in the overall scheme of things. And some of that is mandated training. There are certain things that post requires officers to be recertified, retrained on a regular basis. So some of that is dictated. A lot of the agencies that we work with strive to go beyond that 25 hours and obviously try to expose their folks to a lot of different things where, as Mike was saying, they have a little bit more discretion and can be more responsive to current trends or issues of specific interest to the community. So part of what we would be doing is kind of take a deep dive into what the approach is in Davis, how many hours they strive for, how it works, how they provide the training, and how they audit it, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you for listing these areas. I am leaning towards the general audit of in-service training, and I'm wondering if there's some way to combine that with number 1. I think the implicit bias, the de-escalation, defensive tactics, and civil rights, those are all areas of interest, but I know you need to look at your schedule. I was going to be reaching out to you this week, Mike, because some people communicated with me about interactions with an officer where the individual ended up in the hospital. So, I look at de-escalation and wonder what the procedures are and what the what's going on with regards to de-escalation and implicit bias. That appeals to me, and I'm sorry I have to keep mentioning it, but January 20th is around the corner, and that just might unleash a lot of things in people. Let's be honest. We just need to make sure that we're doing what we can to provide the tools and the training necessary to our peace officers to maintain peace. So that interests me, those particular areas. Thank you.
Other thoughts? Stephen, Mike, about this possibility of 1 and 2, is that too much? Is that possible?
Anything's possible, Dylan. But we might be able to shoehorn that in. One of the things about the FTO program that Steve and I have already thought about is that there aren't a lot of hires by Davis, so depending on when they're hiring and when they're bringing on people on board, it may be a while, weeks, months before a new recruit comes on board. And so that's why option number 2 might actually end up being a more robust project in the sense that there's definitely going to be in-service training. The FTO training is more up in the air.
Perhaps in the future when we're fighting off, police officer applicants, then we can maybe focus specifically on the first one. Other comments, other suggestions for audit topics, other comments about the ones that Mike and Stephen suggested. It seems like, at least in conversation so far, as there's a leaning toward option number 2. But if there's nothing further, then we'll open up to public comment on this item. Any public comment on this item? Oh, welcome.
Alan Hirsch. My earlier comment was misunderstood. False positives in terms of arrests and police activity are a problem. That's what the arrest, the driving while black, the over arrests of certain demographic profiling, those are false positive stops. What I'm concerned about is complaints. Can I have these given to false positive reports of hate incidents and crimes that the police collect could then be shared with the FBI and other things, and how that's done and a monitoring of that thing. Because basically that's what's going to happen. We're having citizens turning information, just they see their allegations unvetted, given to the police, then given to the FBI, and then the FBI takes action. Because we have a weaponization of the FBI under Trump, who will basically we are a threat of taking action of that. And we should have some discussion about how those unvetted possibly false positive allegations of hate incidents are handled. This is about privacy, and I think that should be on your list for discussion. This is a very volatile, controversial issue in our community. The definition of anti-Semitism is that some people think is if you pick out Israel and don't discuss other things, you are an anti-Semite. By that definition, the Council of Davis, who passed a resolution about the ceasefire, is anti-Semitic. So it's a very low bar by some people's standards of what's anti-Semitic and what can go into the file. So we should have a discussion about how those police files are handled and how they are transferred. Because those unvetted files can go any place, and that's how you destroy people's reputations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just, not necessarily putting this on the table in terms of today or the audit that we're going to engage in the next couple of months. But what I also, at some point, think we should take a look into is some of the dispatch training policies. I know that, that we've discussed it at some of our past meetings. There's, interest to what, how things are sort of triaged in that system. And I know that dispatch has responsibility at other agencies like the fire department and even ambulance, but it's still operated by the police department, right, Kelly?
It's housed in the police department, and they report up to a non-sworn manager.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, other final thoughts on the audit topics? Okay. Thanks again, Mike and Stephen, for all y'all do. And we'll look forward to engaging with both of you on the audit to come.
Dylan, can I ask a quick
Yes.
question? So this is for Mike and Stephen. Are you going to take the feedback or the input received from the commission and then try to work on another proposal? Or is there something else that we need to be doing?
I think we're good. I think we have enough feedback to get going. I think what we'll try to do is fold in the 2 topics into one and proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe traditionally what's happened, Mike, is when we get sort of close-ish to the end, you'll sort of ask us to form or maybe we already will form a subcommittee, and then, we sit down with you and Stephen and sort of review what the preliminary bits of the report are. And so maybe you can just sort of let us know when that time has come, and then we'll go ahead and form that subcommittee. Anything else? Okay, moving on to our much awaited, I'm sure this is what everyone's been waiting for, selection of chair and vice chair for next year. Usually we do this in the January meeting. Did you have something, Kelly?
I was just going to say that anybody is eligible for chair or for vice chair. I think you guys know the sort of roles and responsibilities.
I'd
of
like to
both.
nominate someone. Oh.
Oh, I
and
think
you-
also
Mm,
that there might be
good.
an announcement as to, yeah.
I'm not running for reelection. There's an open position.
Come on, you, I was gonna nominate you for chair.
No, I'm not gonna run. So I was confused about my term even. I thought when I was signing up, it was 2 years. I think that was true initially, and I was an alternate. And so, and in my mind, it was, and I think it did change. I became regular, but anyway, I'm planning to discontinue after June, if that when my term completes. So I won't run to be the vice chair anymore. You know, I'm not going to be able to see it through. As I sometimes talk about, I do a lot of police stuff at work and I'm a little overloaded. Anyway, just, you know, a lot of work and at work and a lot of work at home with the kids. So anyway, just kind of a time thing. And yeah, so that's my plan.
Yes, but yeah, I wanted to make sure that was known before people started making nominations. But y'all know what the job is. It's running the meetings. It's you know, sometimes representing us to the council when we have a recommendation. Nominations for chair and vice chair.
And you can nominate somebody else or you can nominate yourself.
Yes,
Doesn't matter.
and I would certainly recommend not nominating anyone who's not here. But yes, nominations, excuse me, for chair and vice chair.
Well, I think you've done a great job as chair. I really do. And I really do. I'd like to nominate you and see you, no pressure, but I'd like to nominate you and see you stay on as chair.
I am perfectly happy to do that if there are no other nominations. All right. You accept.
I think I'm awfully new.
I'd like to nominate you as vice chair.
Right, yes.
I'll go as
I'd like
vice
to nominate
chair.
Angela as vice chair. Yeah, would you? Yeah.
So you're,
I-
okay, yes.
Sorry, I was gonna do one at a time,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
so
no worries.
I want to nominate you as chair and I'd like to nominate her as vice chair. She's okay with that.
But as long as my term, because I know I'm an alternate that got put into a space, I don't know.
No, alternates can serve as, there was an
You're-
alternate
you're-
as chair, right?
You're a regular member.
No, I know, but I don't know. I think the term ends.
Well, half of every commission ends this coming June, so let's take that out of the equation. Any of you sitting up here right now is eligible to be chair or vice chair,
Vice chair.
or 2 co-chairs, no vice chair. I don't care how you divvy it up.
Any other thoughts, comments, nominations on that? This is how it always goes. You know, I'm always thinking there's going to be, ooh, this is the, you know, the competitive election, then it never happens. One person for each slot. Yes. Mm-hmm. Which
Microphone.
that's what I'm immediately doing as soon as I win the lottery.
I wouldn't automatically then go into your position.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, but then don't buy any tickets.
I don't go anywhere.
And if that was not agreeable to the vice chair, there could always be a conversation about how to handle that. This is really meant so that we have somebody to preside over the meetings. There's very little baby kissing involved in being the chair or the vice chair.
You don't
And
even
then-
use a gavel.
And we can get you a gavel.
I have
We-
one at home, but it
We
collects
we
dust.
do have
so we
chairs
don't
of
need it.
commissions who really love the gavel. And to help with, to help kind of manage and put together the agendas. So those are the 2 primary factions or roles.
Yes. Okay. And I guess, you know, well, we need to take a vote, I guess. Well,
So let's see. Cecilia, you made a motion.
yes.
Mary, I'm not sure if you made a motion as a substitute motion or if
Well, it wasn't
you
accepted.
removed that. Okay. Who seconded Cecilia's motion?
No one did yet. By who? Okay.
Okay, thank
All those in favor of that?
Everybody know what the motion is?
Yes. Yes.
So Dylan is chair, Angela is vice chair is the motion.
Yes. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, just by virtue of this being about this, I'm going to abstain. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have done that before we voted. Whoopsie daisy. Any public comment on this item? Just in closing, we do, as Commissioner Wilson mentioned, we have some of us, myself included, with our terms expiring in June. The future of the commission is going to be a different flavor. I think post that June, please talk with your friends and loved ones in the community who you think might be a good addition to the proceedings of this commission. I'll just say, I know a number of you have heard this from me directly. And it might seem like it goes without saying, but I think this commission has to have people of color on it. I know this is a town with its own demographics, which, people of my skin tone are not the, predominant ethnic group. But I think both my term and Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald's term expires in June, which, creates a prospect of there being no people of color on the Police Accountability Commission. So anyway, just, think about the folks in your circles in your life here in Davis, and if they could make a good addition to the work of this commission. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to, so Commissioner Griswold, you're not going to be here starting next, or June, it's June, okay. I just wanted to say I could wait till June, but I just want to say that I always appreciate your input, and your opinions really make me pause and reflect on what I'm thinking and broaden my views. So I really appreciate that. That's why I wanted to nominate you as chair. So, but thank you so much for all the work you've done and your input.
Yes, I'll say, knowing that you'll be here for a couple more months, but this will be your last meeting as vice chair. I do really also second what Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald said in terms of your contributions to this the conversations that we've had evolving over the months, but particularly, utilizing your insight as a public defender and someone who's seeing the other side of this conversation. Okay, now to 8A. Our outreach event, which has a subcommittee of Commissioners Canning, Vice Chair Griswold, and Commissioner Sherman. Do y'all have a report for us?
We did meet not too long ago, and Kelly very graciously joined us as well. And we were noticing that she might be able to a bit more of an inside track with some of the individuals or groups that we were reaching out to. And then I think we were kind of just left it that you were going to reach out to some and then circle back.
So I think that the information that I have right now is that Dana Bailey, who is our Director of Social Services and Housing, did talk with the Social Services Commission and let them know. I'm not sure if she asked or told them, but they'll be involved. They'll be we'll be using their name as well as the PAC, since a lot of what we're talking about really delves over into the social services realm. So we wanted to be sure they were aware. Dana is also, if the subcommittee and the commission would like, she is agreeable and available and is holding the date until, waiting for further information if you'd like her to be at the meeting and presenting in any form or fashion. We are still working on I think it was some of the specific health-related contacts. So Sutter in particular was one that you had mentioned.
Mental health or health in general?
This was a contact. So I don't have any updates on that at the moment. But things are progressing, I think, and I think we probably need to have another conversation about structure of the actual meeting. And once we can lock down a little bit of that, then we can get some advertising out probably within the next 2 weeks. So people have about a month to think about it.
That sounds about right to me. I've actually been in contact with NAMI YOLO, or is it YOLO NAMI? NAMI YOLO. And they're enthusiastic about participating. I just have to talk to her this week. I'm hoping to sort of give her some more information about what the expectations are and find out what they might be willing to do. But they were, immediately, yes, we want to participate. I'd sure like to have somebody from the county. Maybe you and I could talk this week about how to crack that, how to get into the county and get them to participate.
Yeah, the county, it's the Health and Human Services Agency within the county, and they're just undergoing such change right now. Every time we turn around, they've reorganized or restructured. So we do need to figure out who exactly would be the best for whatever messaging we want from the county.
Okay, I'll send you an email. We can talk about it.
That sounds good.
Okay.
When we were talking, I know we had mentioned about having some group that reaches out to women, men regarding domestic violence issues. And I think Empower YOLO was mentioned. Have you all reached out to them or another similar organization?
I saw Robert shaking his head. Okay. So one to add to the list.
If you want me to, I can reach out to someone. Is that okay? I don't want to step on any toes. Yeah. Okay.
Just report
To
back to
have
me.
them.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll put them in contact with you, Kelly. Is that okay? Okay.
And then I know when I work with the Restorative Justice Project, the Communicare is very active in their mental health and substance abuse. So I don't know if that might be a group to be represented here because they do an awful lot with people in distress. So maybe they would be better than HAS.
Yes, or not lots of, but some community health resources to be able to grab onto and hopefully participate.
There's a really good group called CASA, and I wonder if we could reach out to them.
These are all fantastic organizations. And I think, again, Kelly's keep reminding us kind of like how tying it into our focus as a police accountability commission, where we're not putting on just sort of a general resource fair, which would be a fabulous event. Like, what are all the different random resources in our community? But this one, I think the idea specifically tying into our mission had to do with what might be situations where people might feel called to like, oh, I don't know what to do, I'll call the police, when instead it might be better for everyone involved, including the police, if they if they put the person in distress or whatever the situation might be, in touch with another organization. So it's not sort of just broadly it's a bit more focused, although these are great ideas. And Empower was on the list. I'm trying to remember. We hadn't heard back from them anyway, but so kind of that narrowing a little bit. And then I also wanted to segue into you did, and Kelly, talk about we're not having another meeting between now and then, and so whatever outreach we plan to do, we need to discuss right now. Outreach for the outreach,
or the full commission needs to empower the subcommittee to work with staff and
Right.
get it done.
Well, if we wanted to enlist your help, now would be the time to do that.
So if I could,
go ahead.
one other thing that we had talked about and that I didn't mention was we talked about having somebody available to explain dispatch. What happens when you call 911? Who answers? How do they triage? How do they know where to send? What happens there? I think for a lot of people that is kind of a black box, and I think having an understanding of what a dispatcher, the thought process and the thought tree that they have to go through in order to dispatch appropriately might be really instructive to people and help them understand. And that was kind of the law enforcement, if you will, or the police link that we were looking at. Was that, Elizabeth, did that describe it properly?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I know there's certainly people who experience, sort of long-term mental health crises or challenges that they, deal with, who are really interested in, people who would come up to my farmer's market table being like, hey, well, what exactly is the, who calls with who and, so yeah, that would be, I think a topic of interest to a lot of people in town.
That might help to even have a case, an example of a case happen where there is somebody playing the person calling in to a mental health or project and see how the dispatcher just goes through it.
If they would be available or, for that.
Or a sample, because, being told what they do is somewhat different than seeing an example of something happen.
Everybody's a different styled learner.
Yeah, I mean, it just, case studies
Mhm.
often are a little more effective.
Mhm, mhm.
Um,
Off the top of my head, what's our date again?
February 12th.
Any other thoughts about, as Vice Chair Griswold was mentioning, groups to reach out to?
Right.
Sort of, as you were kind of noting, areas that we should maybe have some focus on, gaps that we don't want to have, as this will be our last full commission meeting.
Kelly, you were saying in a couple weeks starting out, I remember last time that you made flyers, or can you tell us what, I don't want to put too much on you, but what you might be able to help
I can
out with
promise
and-
you that you do not want me making the flyer because it will be atrocious looking.
Yes, yes, yes.
But fortunately, I have some colleagues who are very much better with graphics than I am. Generally, what we've been doing for community events is we've been creating, I call it a flyer. It's not necessarily a paper flyer, although we can certainly make some paper flyers, but then we would push that out electronically through our different social media resources. Quite frankly, we would ask any of you to share with your networks in whatever form or fashion you want. And then, our council members might do the same as well with their networks. And so that's been working pretty well for us. If there are individual commissioners who do want a piece of paper to share with people, that's fine too. I just need to know, who you are and how many you want.
Mhm.
So.
Kelly, could they send this out to the neighborhood watch groups too?
I don't know. I'd have to ask. PD oversees the neighborhood watch groups, and I'd have to see if they have a
Because
listing.
I think then they could disperse it to their people that are on their groups, and since these are topics.
Yeah. So there's two different types of neighborhood groups. I want to make sure
Oh.
we're talking about the same one. There's Neighborhood Watch, which is a little less structured in terms of who's a member of Neighborhood Watch. That's when you're looking for bad guys in your neighborhood. And then there's neighborhood associations, which run the gamut from, looking for safety issues to having an annual barbecue. I mean,
Yeah,
that
I was
depends on the
talking neighborhood watch.
Neighborhood Watch. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
But as it's brought up now, I think,
Either way.
we do have a good, particularly near the core of town, sort of history of neighborhood associations. So it might be good to include them as well.
Yeah, I mean, also, I had asked you, Kelly, about utility bills, including something in the utility bills. I know, because the timing might be great because I know I just got mine today. So the beginning of the month, I don't know.
It's increased it for what, the fifth or sixth time?
That's a different commission. It's a different meeting, different agenda item. I can check. I have to see if there's other things that might already be in the bill, but the lead time that we have to have for sending, because we don't send those out in-house. So the lead time that we have to have, we may be cutting it too
Okay.
close. So I'll check and see.
Thank you.
But
Okay.
Yes.
We have a neighborhood association and I do bring the information. It would be nice to have something to put on our website too. I don't know how many people look at our website, but we're getting a website and it would be nice to have something to put on there.
Do you mean a digital version of the flyer?
Something,
Oh.
yeah.
so we would send out we would share all the digital version of the flyer with all of you. And then, I would ask each of you, whatever networks you have, whatever resources you have, push that out. And that's different for each person.
Perfect, thank you.
Like I remember last time, people even sort of took on like, I'm going to give it to my Rotary group, or I'm going to give it to put something people I'm related to on campus, or I'm going to, like that sort of thing. And maybe we're not going to divvy it up right now, but just kind of our own ideas of who we are connected to and really kind of make that effort to put the word out there. Yeah, exactly. Whatever networks we do have. And I would ask Kelly, is that what, a similar conversation potentially happening with the Social Services Commission, that they might be invited to?
So we
Spread
will
the
share
word.
it as well with Social Services Commission. They won't have really say in what it looks like or
Mhm.
anything like that. We'd share it with them and ask them the same thing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And so, I think maybe we'll talk afterwards, Robert, perhaps you, me and Kelly, around what, the creation of the flyer, whether we need, to pass along to you some text or something like that. And, I think maybe we need one more meeting at least. Okay, so we'll finalize that. Great.
Anything? Oh, yes.
I don't want to put too much on your plate, but another group that I thought of, because when we're talking about like police interaction with domestic violence situations or mental health, and I've seen this on Facebook and Instagram a lot. I don't know if it was because of holidays or what, but moms in particular that were overwhelmed or in situations that were not the best. And they were asking anonymously, where can I take my children to be watched while I have to go to court or while I have to deal with this situation, so that, I can get a restraining order, something like that. Anyways, what came to mind was the YOLO Crisis Nursery. They're such a wonderful group, and people should know about them and what they do. I think it'd be great. I can reach out to them. I don't want to overwhelm anybody with that, but I think they're a good resource, and I think more people need to know about it.
Again, I think that sounds like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am familiar with them and participated in some of their things. Amazing resource. I'm not sure if they're kind of what we're thinking about related to this event exactly. Kind of the idea, I think that and Robert, if I'm not explaining it well, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but that it was around the notion of like alternatives to calling the police. Some people don't like that title, but who are you going to call? Yes, that was kind of the title of when maybe you think, oh, I need the police, but maybe there's another option. If somebody's in crisis, or somebody's suspicious in your neighborhood, or somebody's having a mental health crisis, or somebody's unhoused and hanging out, are there resources instead of, do we need somebody to show up in uniform with a gun, or do we need rather a social worker, or an outreach worker, or somebody else along those lines? So again, kind of not just a general community resources fair, but specifically when maybe the police are overburdened and maybe they're not the most equipped to answer a situation that somebody finds themselves in. Or maybe, like our auditors were discussing the notion of de-escalation. Sometimes having police show up can be triggering for somebody, and that actually escalates instead of de-escalates. So more that kind of notion, if that makes sense to folks, that was kind of the general idea for the event. And that was the tie-in with, the police connection.
Can I ask?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I think that it's important to be very clear about what is going to be presented at the event and who's going to be there. And so I think that is really good advice. Do you have a list? Do you have like an agenda for the meeting? Because that might sort of like really drive who to reach out to, because you don't want to reach out to people and then say, no, never mind, we've decided that we're not going to.
You mean to reach out
isn't-
to present at the meeting, or to be invited to attend as a participant?
To present.
Oh,
at the
yeah,
meeting, because
I
this
actually
this is
think-
what the outreach is for, right? Or is it?
No,
No?
the outreach is inviting people to come participate that night. I actually would appreciate if just the people on the like subcommittee were reaching out to organizations. Is kind of what I thought.
Okay, so the people that you want to have outreach to are the organizations you have outreach to, like NAMI.
We want
And-
to outreach to the public
Oh,
and
outreach to the public.
and have people from organizations who will provide information about alternatives to calling the police.
But they're not going to present.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so our subcommittee, we've got that part handled. So
Okay.
we don't, that's what I was trying to kind of say is we don't really need more ideas about different
Okay,
organizations.
okay.
We
all
kind
right.
of got that piece. And I think we kind of have a handle around what the agenda is going to look like and who's going to do what. We're
Okay,
going to have one
all right.
final meeting to finalize that.
Got it.
What we are asking commissioners to do is reach out to their networks and invite people to come,
Got it.
again, the general
Okay.
public,
All right.
come and attend.
Okay, because I was hearing like some suggestions for invitation and I thought, well, don't you have that already?
That's
And it
why I was
sounds like
trying to
yes. Okay,
clarify. We
great.
don't actually
All
do
right.
that at this
Okay.
point. Yeah.
If it's at all possible for you to get a sheet with resource names and telephone numbers and contact information that we could have at the meeting to give people, that would probably be wonderful. You maybe already thought of that, but that would be great.
Little confused what this is about. Is it about outreach to all organizations or all issues of public safety or just things? So, but in that regard, if it's all issues, there are some public safety issues that are not in the cities, like animal welfare, such as the sheriff's office and whatnot. So those maybe should be brought in if that's in the scope of what you're doing. But regardless of what you do, I think it's very important. The city has been a big thing about videoing. You should video this event. You should have tabs for each one of the 2 or 5 minute sections so people can capture this amazing thing you're putting together, and people can capture and see what people explain with their organizations and put it on the website. It should be an easy gimme to do. And the city has plenty of PR resources to do that. We have an hour interview with Mike Webb. I think this would be a lot more useful than listening to my web talk. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. So just, generally, the Police Accountability Commission has as a part of its mandate that we do outreach events to the community. We're not responsible for doing the police department's outreach, but we do outreach with respect to our work and mandate with respect to transparency and accountability. We've sort of decided that our way of exercising and executing that mandate is that we're going to hold an outreach event each year, going to be on a different topic. And so as I think Robert and others have outlined, the topic for this year is slated to be, well, it's supposed to be last year, but the topic for this outreach event is slated to be, the sort of who you're going to call topic about, other resources and entities and agencies that folks can reach out to seek public safety assistance separate from the police department. I'm sorry, but also with respect to what you talked about at the end in that public comment, Kelly, I know this has been sort of a thing that we've talked about here and there in terms of recording these. Is that a possibility? Is that within the realm?
We don't have any plans to record it at
Okay.
this point.
Other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? All right. Taking us to the I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. So we are 11 minutes over our time budget for this meeting. Does anyone want to make a motion to extend us by a certain amount of time? I'd like to extend it. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, any abstentions? Motion passes. Okay. Let's see. This next one will be quick. We don't have a report. We will bring back an item to y'all to y'all at the March meeting since we're not having a regularly scheduled February meeting. This is the item 8B, the annual police auditor review subcommittee, which is myself, Commissioner Sherman and Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald. We unfortunately were not able to meet. I don't know why we ever give ourselves subcommittee assignments over the holidays, but we did not meet over the latter half of December, and we'll have a report for y'all at our March meeting. Any questions, comments on that? Public comment on that item? Moving to our long-range calendar, anyone want to make a suggestion for a future agenda item?
I am really curious about how internal affairs works in Davis Police. And so I'd like to have the chief come back at some point and talk about the internal affairs um, process. It sometimes comes up in terms of what the police auditor does. So I'm sort of curious about that. I don't know if other members are, but that's sort of internal workings of the police department to a certain degree.
Yes, any other, future agenda item suggestions? Go ahead.
There had been talk at the last meeting about everybody being able to tour the facility. And I don't know if that's something that wants to be put on the agenda to be able to set up a time for touring the police department.
I would
don't
be
know.
hesitant to have that for an agendized meeting, just because that's, our once a month
I mean,
time.
just put it on there so that the time could be set for touring.
Let
Oh.
me talk, I had talked with Chief Henry, when was it? Last meeting that we talked
Yes.
about it? And let me remind him of that and see if we can't get some dates and times set up where people can, you don't have to come, but you can choose to come. We would probably do it in small groups, because otherwise it's not appropriate to do it as a meeting. So we can do that, give you some options and see who wants. If you did it in small groups, it wouldn't be an agendized meeting.
Less than 4.
And because an agendized meeting doesn't really work for that sort of well, a small as in less than a quorum type of a group. And not everybody may be interested in it, and that's fine.
Other questions? Okay. Other suggestions for future agenda items? Public comment?
I spent 8 weeks attending the Sheriff's Academy. So it's very fascinating. That's a big resources draw off the city to this thing. But in terms of visiting and viewing the police department, it can very conveniently to do a public meeting with lots of views. I think more people that see what's going on is appropriate. The tree commission, when it existed, would have true tours of the urban forest, and they actually had van, and public members could go along and drive around the city with the tree commission to see and understand, and the arborist explain the trees. So I don't think I think it would be wonderful to have the commission invite the public to actually see the police department internal and what's going on. There's no reason why that can't be done as an extra meeting, and Brown Act should not be an issue in terms of that. SACOG has meetings that are tours of things like that invites the public can go along too. And this is the one location, so there's no logistical reason why this couldn't be done. And I encourage you to make the police department as transparent as possible, because we need to have trust and visibility. So please consider that.
Thank you. I note that it's not, it wouldn't necessarily be a future agenda item, but also, throwing in the ride-alongs in with this sort of package as well. And I just want to note, just for the record, that I would be interested in hearing some, kind of a presentation or a walkthrough about the internal affairs work of the department. And I think, as we mentioned at the December meeting, it's good to have the chief, as we did have this evening. I think it's also good to hear from other folks in the department who might have more direct responsibility. I always go back to the conversation we had with Lieutenant Waltz about the training process billions of years ago, it seems like now. And so if there was maybe a different personnel.
Yeah, with internal affairs, generally the way it's set up is that there is a lieutenant assigned to that particular function. And while they may rotate every year or over time, it might be useful to hear from that, that particular person.
I think so. Yeah, so if that was possible, I would certainly support that. Anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't bring this up sooner, but on the Davis Police Facebook page, there's a memorial for Officer Natalie Corona on the 10th.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have taken an opportunity in my beginning of the meeting commemoration. It's always weird when we're, coming to these January meetings, because as y'all will recall, when we were originally impaneled, it was just a couple of days before our first meeting in January of 2019 that Officer Corona was killed. And I've also been seeing on, the city's social media and other places the commemoration of her work and, her role in the community. So, of course, a tremendous light to the community with a lot of potential. And, we are unfortunately sorry to not have with us anymore. let's see, adjournment, unless there's any other agenda items. Okay. Yes. Is there a second? All right. We're adjourned, y'all. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Stephen. We look forward to seeing y'all and talking with y'all next month.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Well, me. You said